Everybody, I am Dr. Mika Riley. I am an ACL Rehab specialist and of course a physical therapist out of Seattle, Washington. And I am also a three-peat ACLer myself. But I wanted to welcome all of you new members. This is a community that was designed for you. Unfortunately, a lot of people experience this injury every single year. But the important thing that we want to do is really make sure that you feel empowered, and we want to improve the outcomes so that way you only have to go through this one time. But I wanted to talk to you about, you may be in this community now because you have recently injured your ACL, and I'm so sorry that you have to go through that. I just recently tore my third time back in March, and so I'm starting the process all over again. So I definitely can feel your pain. It's not super easy to go through. You have a lot of things that change, and you're just going through a lot right now. But the topic of today I wanted to go over was what happens after you tear your ACL, and what are the next important steps, and kind of going through that with you. But as I mentioned, the biggest thing is, you're going through a lot right now. And the last thing you probably are thinking about is what are your next steps? And sometimes things don't go fast enough. And that's just the most difficult part, especially nowadays. But the goal is to equip you with evidence-based knowledge that will help support you during this time to help figure out what steps you should take in order to make sure that you are getting the care that you need in order to get back to the sport or whatever it may be that you absolutely love with 100% confidence and by reducing your risk of another tear. So the biggest thing is if you've torn your ACL, there's just a lot going on through your mind right now. And the biggest thing is making sure that you get the support that you need. And it starts honestly with getting your healthcare team aligned. Don't just go to wherever your primary care provider told you to go to. Usually, most often, surgeons, doctors will refer you to whatever is close to your home. But the biggest thing is it's important to interview your medical providers, just as if you were to go try to find a job. You want to find a job that fits you well and that you fit for them well. And so you just have to figure out who that is for yourself. And that encompasses your surgeon, and it also encompasses your physical therapist. I tell everyone, I want you to feel absolutely 100% confident in your provider. And the most important thing is that they are evidence-based and that they are not practicing the old way, because we found that the old way of practicing is probably what is leading to people to have a second re-injury, which is something that we definitely do not want. So just because a location is convenient for you does not mean that it is right for you. So just think of it that way. So it's really important to do this correctly the first time instead of having to go through this whole process again. So here's some things I want you to consider. Choosing the right environment. We all know that you become who you surround yourself by. So it's really important, especially for the rehab component, to choose a place that is filled with similar goals, that you are seeing a lot of people in the clinic that are moving some weight around and aren't just doing some measly table exercises. And you might even run into multiple ACLers in the gym as well, in that rehab gym as well. So just making sure that you are choosing a setting that is supportive of your injury and sees multiple of your injury. So feel confident in your healthcare team. They must have experience in ACL rehab and ACLs in general. So whether that's operative or non-operative, I tell people there's not every PT, there's great PTs out there, but not every PT is equipped with the knowledge or the tools necessary to carry you all the way through your ACL rehab. Just because one person sees an ACL or two a year does not necessarily mean that they keep up with the most recent evidence. So it's really important that you find a PT that is able to clearly define what ACL rehab should look like. When it comes to choosing a surgeon, I honestly tell people go explore options. It's okay if you go see 3 surgeons to figure out are 2 of them saying the same thing, or there's different approaches, but at the end of the day, you need to feel confident with your surgeon. They need to make you feel good, but also give you information to help you make the best choice for you. And I want to remind you that you always have a choice. You at the end of the day are the person that says yes or no. And just because the surgeon said you need to do that does not mean that you need to do that. It just means the information that they give you, they're just helping you make it a choice at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, the choice is yours. So don't settle on your healthcare team. You deserve the absolute best. This is the most heart-wrenching injury ever. It is the hardest injury in my personal opinion. I might be biased, but it is not easy. And this is a minimum of 9 months to a year, and sometimes even more if you experience some setbacks. So don't settle on your healthcare team, because you deserve the absolute best, and you deserve to only go through this one time. But I want to go through a couple questions that I encourage you to ask your physical therapist. If I were you, I would, if you're calling a clinic, don't go to the ones like the Mills. I want you to make sure that you are getting a physical therapist that you will work with for 1 whole hour and won't be handed to a physical therapy assistant, won't be handed off to multiple physical therapist providers. You need somebody that's going to guide you all the way throughout your rehab. So here are a couple questions. The first one is, how many ACL rehab clients do you rehab every single year? If the answer is, well, I have 1 every 2 years or something like that, that's probably not a good fit for you, because they probably do not follow up with the most up-to-date evidence, which is a problem. If they see, 15 or more, that's probably a good likelihood that they may know what they're doing and they're keeping up to date with evidence. And if they haven't seen any and their specialty is in shoulders, it's probably not a good fit for you either. The other thing is, asking, I highly recommend, honestly, you go to see a physical therapist before you go see the surgeon, or get your surgeon lined up and everything, because there is, you do not have to have surgery. It all depends on what you're trying to get back to, but you don't have to have surgery for your ACL. There are plenty of people I have rehabbed that have done just amazingly without an ACL and have done really high level things. But that's not for everybody. So just figuring out if they know whether you're a good candidate for the operation, or would you be okay without, or could you hold off for a little while? The other thing is graft types. So you'll see in our roadmap that I have gone through and listed out pros and cons and the evidence behind all the graft choices. I tell everyone, honestly, it's dependent on your situation, but your physical therapist, based on your goals and what you look like and your history and all of that stuff, should be able to help give you information regarding, graft types, and what maybe is best for you. Again, at the end of the day, you have the 100% final decision, but it's really important to look at the graft types that there are, and make that decision for yourself. But the more information you are given, the better decision that you can make and feel very well informed about it. I think the important thing is the philosophy behind ACL rehab. Every physical therapist is going to be different. Some are going to be practicing evidence-based, and some are not going to be, and they'll be following the protocol to the T, which also are very, very old protocols that surgeons designed 15 plus years ago sometimes. and don't keep those up to date with the most recent evidence. So the philosophy as a PT for ACL rehab should be changing basically every year, because there's newer and newer evidence that's coming out, and you deserve to have the best information and the best tools possible to get you through this ACL rehab. So the philosophy should be very clearly stated on how they're going to get you there. Another thing is like when will I be able to run? So the biggest thing comes down to, is your physical therapist, some people might have meniscus repairs, which those are, non-weight bearing situations that we do have to respect so we can let that heal. But there are other ways around it that we can really make sure that you are still moving, still strengthening, but within those precautions. The other thing is the protocol. So when a lot of questions that I often get is, when will I be able to run? And the answer to that should be very criteria based. Just because the surgeon's protocol says you need to be running at 3 months does not mean that you are ready for that. So there should be criteria, very, very, very specific criteria that your physical therapist that you're interviewing should be able to state. And this should include, obviously you need to be a minimum of 3 months out of surgery. But you also need to have a quiet knee, no pain, no swelling, full range of motion. Your quad strength should be tested, and you should have a number instead of having the person kick into your hand. It should be greater than 80%. Minimum sometimes about 70%, but closer to 80. You should be able to pass a squat test, a jump test, all of these things, the calf raise test. There's multiple things that you should be able to pass. Like I tell people, you really shouldn't be running before you're jumping, because that is really backwards. What if your knee doesn't like jumping and swells up? That's a problem, because guess what? Running is basically jumping. And if you could have figured out that your knee was not ready for running by starting off with some jumps first, that could have saved a setback. So these criteria need to be very specifically stated. If they are not, go find someone that can. The other thing is, the question is, how do you incorporate strength and conditioning into your PT plans? Honestly, at a certain point in time, we need, of course, at the very beginning, we respect the initial healing, all of those things, get range of motion, get the initial strength going of your quad, and then just get you to a point where you're able to walk again. But throughout that time, we need to be providing some strengthening as well. And then once you enter the mid phase, you should be able to do your PT should almost be looking like you're about to step into a gym workout, where you're moving around some weight, and it's getting progressively harder sometimes. And it shouldn't look like straight leg raises at 3 months. It shouldn't look like fire hydrants or clamshells at 3 months. It should be looking like you're getting ready to deadlift, you're getting ready to squat, you're doing some single leg movements, you're doing some jumps, things like that, to really make sure that we're increasing your strength to really prepare you for the demands later on in the phases. The other question is, how quickly post-op rehab, or how quickly should I start rehab after surgery? I see people as early as 3 days. I personally started my formal physical therapy, day 3. And the evidence behind that is very in support of doing that, because a lot of times, this is where we can intervene the best, where we help you figure out, okay, how is the pain doing? How's the swelling doing? How do we keep you moving, but also respect that you might be in pain and you do have some swelling, but just having more guidance, because a lot of times people are handed a sheet by the surgeon with no specific rep ranges, just kind of like, oh yeah, do this 3 times a day, something like that, and with no intensity to it, with no like, oh, back off if it hurts this much, none of that. So this is where we as providers and ACL rehab specialists come in and say, hey, This is what I want you to do. This is the guideline. So, talk to your surgeon and see if he's on board for getting you into rehab and in support of that within 3 to 5 days after surgery. Because honestly, like day 1 through 3 kind of suck in general. Because you just don't feel good, you're on narcotics, and you're just trying to figure out the very beginning life of needing help. So I find that day 3 is pretty doable for most of my clients. And it's honestly mentally pretty helpful. So as soon as you can, honestly, and get your surgeon on board with that. So that way we can mitigate atrophy and all the negative stuff that come with that. How long do most clients stay in PT with me personally for ACL rehab? There's 2 different answers, because it depends if they're going without insurance or if they're with their insurance. Unfortunately, insurance isn't in full support of return to sport because that is not deemed medically necessary. So honestly, sometimes my patients get cut off at 3 months and then they turn into a bridge program with me. So that's one thing. People who go out, if they're out of network with me and pay cash to see me, I carry them through all the way. And I get to the point where I see them play in a game, whatever it might be, and we make sure we get them there. I even get to the point where I get to do on-field rehab with them because because it's within the scope of my practice. So, whether that's I carry them through the 9 months or I carry them through 12 months, or some people who had a very complicated case, I can carry them through to the 18-month mark, whatever it might be, whatever they need. And it's really case dependent, but at minimum 9 months, whether they're on insurance or not. And we just figured that out. In terms of criteria for return to sport, like I mentioned before, it's really important that you select a physical therapy clinic that is in support of ACL rehab, has all the up-to-date evidence and all the tools necessary, because we are finding that unfortunately, only 55% of the physical therapists out there actually appropriately strength test people during ACL rehab. And that doesn't mean kicking into someone's hand as hard as you can, because that's not objective at all. We need numbers, and the more numbers that we have, the better. So what happens is we have the specific dynamometer that is able to give us an objective number that somebody kicks it's hooked to their ankle and they kick out as hard as they can for 5 seconds and tries to produce their max force within that 5 seconds. So that's how we strength test. So strength testing needs to happen. And the return to sport criteria is that they are a minimum of 9 months out from surgery and that they pass all these tests, which includes greater than 90% strength on the affected side compared to the unaffected side. And so that's of your quad and that's of your hamstring. When it comes to jump tests, we do calculate their reactive strength. So we look at their vertical height when they're jumping, their vertical jumps. We look at their distant jumps, and we look at sport-specific tasks as well to see change of direction and side-to-side movements. And all is dependent on what somebody's wanting to get back to. But we really need to make sure that we're testing things that are relevant to their sport. But at minimum, strength testing needs to happen because we're seeing that people are not meeting the criteria necessary to return to sport. And those are the people who go on to have a second injury within the first few months of returning to sport, which is a huge problem. And nobody needs to go through that, honestly. So those are things that I really want to have you ask, and go ahead and go through our ACL roadmap during the prehab phase, where you will find these list of questions and take them with you and reference them when you're talking to your physical therapist as you interview them. And don't feel bad if it's just not a right fit, go find whomever is a right fit, and whomever is practicing evidence-based ACL rehab practices to set you up for success. I cannot emphasize this enough, that this is a problem in our country, and we really need to reduce the re-tear rate. And this happens with choosing the right healthcare team that is keeping up with the ACL rehab evidence. And it starts with that. So don't settle at all, because you deserve the best care possible. And also, like, if you don't have one in your area and you're like, I want the best care possible because you deserve it. We also do virtual ACL rehab. So you're also welcome to schedule a consult with us to see if you're a right fit for us and whatever your needs are to help carry you through your return to sports. So anyways, I mumbled a lot, but that's what I want you to look out for. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to add them here, and we'll get back to you. But I hope you like our ACL roadmap. It's really to empower you and educate you and help improve the outcomes for all of you. So I'll see you soon, see you another time, and I hope you like this.